Welcome to another Keelhauled podcast. I'm your host, CaptainLogun, and we've got a lot of Sea of Thieves news to cover today, so tie yourselves to the mast and hold fast. Ahoy there, pirates. I hope you had yourselves a good week and a good weekend. I know I did. This week, we're going to be talking about a little bit more about the upcoming Season 9 that is kicking off in March, what I am dubbing Shrouded Spoils 2.0. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. But before I get into any of that, I have to thank the patrons because they're the ones that went over to patreon.com/Keelhauled podcast, just like you can, to support this content that is coming to your podcatchers, whether it be on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, or whatever they do, podcasts. I have no clue what they do anymore. Google Podcasts. What else is out there? I know Podbeam's doing their thing. There's Anchor. There's a whole bunch. But these folks are getting it over on patreon.com, and they have their own RSS feed that has the ad-free version. And many of them, honestly, they just want to support because they appreciate the work that I put into this. To delay a podcast, even though I know it's going to really hurt those of you that really love having the podcast on Monday, to make sure that you're getting the most amount of content for this episode, because it is a big one and I'm excited to talk about it. But before I do that, I have to let you know who those patrons are. So thank you to People's Republic, L Cute, Balls, Bam Bam Bagel, Captain Hasco, Captain Hayes, Chateau Neuf, Super Pack, Zombie Killer, Cloud, Cosmic Johnson, Static Mirror, Davram TV, El Jefe Esteban, Fergatron, Godhammer 6, Cloudhammer, I don't know what I'm saying, Trickster, Jabaro 5, Carl Embo, Kazia the Rogue, Nightstar, Lumpy SRQ, Dub Goose, Evil Morpheus, Xbox Mike 29, Murphy Lives, Mutinous Max, Raja the Brave, Registella, Replicated Flame, Rust Belt Kid, Norwegian, Scamelt 666, Captain Dasm, That Kilted Guy, Tien Professor, Real Big Tuna, Big Bad Pad, Mina Fairy, The Lore Chronologist, Deadeye Dre, Hager Owl, Jeff H, Ghost Boy 20, Evil Martha, Peter Miller, Ruski Doo, Thor Von Blitz, Windsor Chris, and Zam. Wow. Thank you all so much for your support. It really does help. And I hope you all are having a fantastic time. Don't forget, the end of the month is when we're going to have the Gold Hoarder episode for March, to make sure if you are a part of that Patreon group, if you're part of that Gold Hoarder, you are invited to come onto the podcast for that episode to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. Doesn't matter to me. All right. With that, let's get into it. First up on today's docket, time-sensitive content. I want to make sure you guys are not missing out on stuff. I am going to be talking about Shrouded Spoils 2.0, but there is some stuff that I want to make sure that you don't forget about, because if you do, you're really, really going to hate yourself later on. What you should already be doing is the Marauders melody stuff, the stuff that you should be jumping into daily to make sure, well, not daily, every 2 days, to make sure that you're getting in, experiencing some different aspect of Sea of Thieves, to make sure that you're working towards those 5 different cosmetics from each of the different years that Sea of Thieves has had an anniversary update. I just got done doing a shrine, the Coral Tomb one, the one that I hate the most. Actually, no, I take that back. I don't know that I hate that one the most, but it's the one where you have to go down and you have to flip the switches in the right order. And every time you do, the water level rises and it spawns sirens. As a solo player, I only had like 4 of the 10 to kill for the thing, so I didn't get any of that. But I got my 5 pieces of coral treasure turned in. I got my exploration of a shrine or a treasury done. So I'm in line to continue getting all of the items I already have. But it's nice to go in, and I've been trying to make sure that I remind my friends who don't jump into Sea of Thieves, but they've probably missed out on a lot of these cosmetics. So I want to make sure that they are getting in there to do that, so they aren't losing out on that opportunity to really kind of get the cosmetics that a lot of us may or may not have. In fact, a lot of people haven't been playing the game since launch, so there's quite a few opportunities for you to jump in and get some stuff. So just remember to be doing that. That ends on the 16th. What kicks off on the 16th is actually going to be a new set of Twitch drops. So just a reminder that if you want the Omen set, this is the Omen wheel, the cannons, and the capstan. This is from the Gears of War. If you're not familiar, a lot of gold, a lot of red and black, metal, lots of skulls. Very nice. I recommend it. If you want those, make sure that you're going over to the different Sea of Thieves streamers. Watch any Sea of Thieves streamer, play for an hour for each reward, and that kicks off from March 16th through March 18th. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Then after the March 16th through the 18th, they'll be kicking off another 3 set of the, or another 4 set technically, of the drops. And that's where they're going to be giving away the figurehead, the flag, the sails, and the hull. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that, because that's going to kick off on the 18th and that's going to go until the 20th. So you have time to be able to do that. Again, 1 hour per item. So you claim in each item, and then you do that. Try and keep an eye on your auto looters if you have any of those extensions to be able to do those. I always recommend them. That way you don't have to think about it too much. Just make sure the first one's working, and as soon as that one's done, then you can leave it to do its own thing. Otherwise you might have to kind of sit there and babysit it. But glad that they're bringing in the Omen stuff. I like the Omen stuff. I think the Omen stuff's some of the better tie-ins that they've done with the Gears of War. It's kind of a bummer that they're doing it now, because I would really have loved to have it coincide with an announcement for another Gears game, or maybe something from Coalition. They're just a fantastic studio. I think they do really good work, and would love to have some announcements this upcoming E3, which I'm hoping to go to this year. So with that in mind, I think the only other thing is Season 9. Season 9 is coming out on March 16th. I'm very excited for this because one of my favorite updates has been Shrouded spoils from the first year. I've talked about this a lot in the past, so it's no surprise to anyone that's been listening to the podcast for a very long time. I loved Shrouded spoils and what it did, because it made the world feel alive. And I actually went back to the original announcement for Sea of Thieves putting out Shrouded spoils, the announcement trailer for that. And after watching it, I realized just how much similarities there were between Shrouded spoils and Season 9, which is why I decided that it was like, this is 2.0. This is getting back to the good old days of what it was like to have just a lot of stuff happen to the world of Sea of Thieves, as opposed to one specific thing that is driving everyone to that content. Like with Season 8, it was all about the dives, right? Everyone was going to the hourglass. That was what was driving content for Season 8. Season 7 was driving players to go out and get their ships and get their milestones and stuff like that with captaincy. And then, with all of that being said, we still had a lot of narrative going on with the world, but there's always kind of been one main thing that comes with the season that kind of really showcases what they want to put out into Sea of Thieves. And with Season 9, we're getting a lot of little things, but a lot of these little things are things that I really, really love. They're things that made me really, really enjoy kind of my day-to-day going into Sea of Thieves, because it was a little bit different each time. So I was looking at Shrouded spoils, and I wanted to kind of write down some of the main things that we got in Shrouded spoils, so that when I talk about what's coming again with Season 9 and some of the things I'm looking forward to, it kind of rings true. So back in Shrouded spoils, we got the first introduction of fog. And this was really kind of cool, because we'd never seen anything in the game like that before. Like, we never had fog in the game. Like, we'd had storms, and storms were about as good as it got. So when we got the fog, it was really unique to have this thing that just kind of roamed around. And there were times where a lot of us were fighting megalodons in the fog, or we'd come across another ship, or we would use the fog as a way to lose other ships. If we were getting chased, or if we were looking for something to do, we would always go hang out in the fog. It really kind of dimmed the atmosphere. The music would kind of get quiet. It'd be really, really spooky. Felt really great. And ever since Pirates Life Caribbean came, or Pirates Life Tall Tales came out, we've had the Black Pearl cosmetics. I've always wanted to see, like, how cool would it be if we just had that cosmetic and having that ship emerge from the fog, and what that would look like in the regular area of the world. Because for the most part, for all intents and purposes, the fog has mostly just been out in the roar, because that's where the least amount of stuff happens. So when something like that spawns, that is generally where it ends up, or it ends up like way on the bottom half of a map, or out on the edges and stuff. And that's kind of where a lot of like shipwrecks and bounty chests and Reaper's bounties and stuff have all kind of been pushed out too. And it's just a real shame, because those were some of the things that I think really were enjoyable about Sea of Thieves in the early days. You know, we got fog, and after cursed sails, we'd always wanted to see like what the skeleton ships would be like. So we got roaming skeleton ships, and we got skeleton sloops. And it was really kind of amazing, because then they took the actual Curse Sails event and they turned it into a world event. So you could actually go and visit the different fleets, which originally were just kind of out in the outskirts of the area. And then eventually they moved them in closer. And then eventually they just relegated it to one area, which I always kind of wondered about, like why they decided to go for that. And with Shrouded spoils, we actually got the onset of ship customizations. It was the first time we could actually customize the wheel, the cannon, and the capstan, and it really brought in some of the original set pieces that we'd wanted to kind of flesh out the rest of our ship. You know, if you had the admiral ship, you wanted to have the cannon, the capstan, the wheels. I'm still waiting for the lanterns and the rowboats. I think those are two things that I would have liked to have seen with season 9. That didn't come in. With Shrouded spoils, we also got the mermaid gems. Those came back. They were originally a Build Red adventure that came out at the end of 2018, at the end of July, which is right about the time that I hit Pirate Legend. And I enjoyed that event because it was unique. We didn't understand what was going on, but I always felt like there was something interesting about the mermaid gems. In my questioning, it was when I started to question Duke in his motivations, which was rightly so. Now we're getting those kind of like moved in, but having them back in Shrouded spoils was fantastic because they were a solid base of gold. They were something that was unique, showing up on islands, and you could turn them into any reputation, which really changed the game for Merchants Alliance. Merchants Alliance was one of the hardest ones to do at the time. You always had to go out and either get a ship together and then go do a bunch of animals. Like we'd barely gotten, I think, crates at that time, like the actual like plants and rum bottles and stuff like that. With the roar, brought in all of that content back in like October. So it was always very unique to have something that you could turn into Merchants Alliance that earned gold and reputation for something without having to go through all the trouble of keeping animals alive or making sure plants didn't wither or bottles that broke or cloth that got soaked. And we also got additions to help out with Merchant Alliance in the form of new fort loot. So at the time we only had one type of fort, and that fort had a fair amount of loot in there, but a lot of the stuff that was in there was the stuff that was kind of contributing to all of the factions except for 2. And that's when we got the skeleton chest and the skeleton or the crate of ancient bone dust. We had the chest and we had the skull. We didn't have the merchant loot. We didn't have the skull. See, this is how long it's been. I know we had the chest, and I'm pretty sure we had the villainous skulls. I don't know that we have anything for the Order Souls. That was like a skeleton captain thing now. But at the time, we were really hungry for a way to kind of bolster our merchant loot. So we got mega kegs and we got the ancient bone dust. And there was a lot of times where we would be working on forts, and because forts were pretty much like one of the main things to actually get loot at, you would find a lot of people working on alliance and say like, hey, you know, we just want this loot. We don't necessarily need the other stuff. We will 100% work with you to complete this fort so that we can just get these one items and you can have the rest. And there was a lot of times where I ran into crews to actually do that. So going now back to this and thinking like, okay, we got the customizations, we got the fleet event, we got the roaming skeletons, we got the fog, we got the mermaid gems, we got the new fort loot, we got the new skelly sloops, and we have a harder kraken as well as the megalodons that were roaming around. It was very interesting to kind of sail around the seas and feel like the world had completely shifted. Like no longer were these just special events. Now we had more to do. We had more things to go after, and we had commendations associated with them. And it was a really interesting time for us because it felt like the culmination of an entire year before the first year of Sea of Thieves had even completed. And we were very happy with it at that point. So now going into season 9, so much of this feels like they've been listening to what I've wanted for a long time, which I think a lot of people have been saying, in that we want to have another Shrouded spoils. We want something that brings a fair amount of quality of life changes to Sea of Thieves that continue to address some of the main concerns that we have beyond some of the big target things, which are things like hit registration, latency on old servers, you know, things like that, things that we know that they're testing and working and playing with, but aren't ready for release. And these are the smaller things that they can do, and they're going to do a whole lot of them and then put them all together in one season to kind of round out what I think we've had in Sea of Thieves for a while, which is a lot of great content, but not a good balance of that content. And I think season 9, which Shrouded Spoils 2.0, is really going to address all of that. And I'm excited for that. It may not sound like I'm like, you know, overhyping it or anything, and I don't think I need to, because at the end of the day, we're all still going to be playing Sea of Thieves. I think these are just going to be things that when we get done at the end of our session and we think back, you know, to a week ago when we didn't have these type of quality of life changes, we're going to be like, man, how did we ever get by without this? And I think some of these are going to feel like that. Like already Sovereigns has completely changed the loot game. Most of us are running around on captain ships. We sail up to the Sovereign Tower, and we just harpoon all the loot off of our ship and immediately drop it onto the platform and then turn it all in one place. And that has completely changed how we do loot in Sea of Thieves. Before, we had to segregate stuff. We had to move all of the Order of Souls stuff to one section. We had to move all of the Merchant Alliance stuff to one section. And we tried to keep all of the Gold Hoarder stuff in one section. And those were the days where we had to actually run each piece of loot to the different tents to be able to turn it in. Now, we don't even take that into consideration. So it's very interesting to think about, like, what are the things that are coming with season 9 and how is that going to impact it? And I think about some of the easy things that we can talk about, like the fruit radio on PC. Very easy to handle. You got a button, it's assigned to fruit, you spam it a bunch of times and you cycle through the different things that you want. It's why PC players tend to have so much easier of a time being able to eat the fruit that they want as opposed to whatever happens to pop up first, because they don't have time to be able to go into their menu to be able to choose the fruit that they want off of their inventory, which is still a weird thing in my mind. Like, we still have an inventory. Do you guys always go to your inventory? I'm always curious how many of you actually navigate to your menu to actually check your inventory and then pick something specific. Small note, I did read in the feedback from last week that you can do this on controller as well. As you hit the, for me, it would be A. I think for most people it's the A button, but I can't, whatever button it is, you can hit it and it'll cycle through it as well too. So just wanted to add this caveat. I did forget that was the thing that you can do on controller. I'm still curious to hear if you go into your inventory at any point though. So looking at season 9 and looking at like the fruit radio and knowing that we also have the bait radio, it's really interesting to see that they have finally come to addressing some of the main issues that I see with playing on a controller, which is ease of access to different things that you want to play with, bringing it more in line on parity with what PC players can do with their keyboard due to the number of keys at their what they have in front of them. I'm sitting here looking at my Elite controller, and I have 4 back pedals that are mapped to jump, I think fruit, swapping my, what is this one? Swapping weapons, running. I can't remember what this one does. It does something. I can't remember what it is. I think it's my fruit thing though. Yeah. So, but then outside of that, I've just got my bumpers, and the bumpers are good to be able to pull up my radios and my quests and stuff like that. But I don't have the flexibility that I have with my keyboard. And I'm hoping that with Shrouded Spoils 2.0, I'll feel like I can navigate to things I want quicker, which will improve, obviously, the quality of life. I think the main thing that is going to happen with season 9, the things that people are really going to remember this season for, kind of the way we think about like storage crates and how those changed the way to be able to take loot from a barrel all at once, and put everything all in one crate and then transport that into your ship supplies. I think the auto harpoon is probably going to be the thing that everyone thinks about when they think back to season 9 and just how good it was, and what really made a difference for them. And I think that, plus with the turning in loot that is in collector's chests, without selling the actual collector's chest, I think those 2 mechanics are the ones that are going to serve people the best. And people are going to think back to season 9 and think, it was cool that we got the ghost fleets back. It was nice that they rebalanced the world thing. It was cool that we could find loot from ships that have been sunk with the birds. But I feel like auto harpoons and turning in chests, or turning in items or trinkets within a collector's chest, were going to be the ones that everyone thinks about in the future, because I think those are going to be the ones that impact us the most on our day to day. And I'm glad for that, because I think those are 2 things that really ought to have been with the game from the get-go. Once we had kind of realized, like, oh, we can pull all of the contents of a barrel and stick it into a storage crate. Why can't we do that with a collector's crate? And it kind of always goes back to the idea of like, okay, well, I can hold a big chest with 2 hands, but why can't I hold a silvered cup and a skull at the same time? And the answer to that is collector's chest. But if you don't have a collector's chest, then it really doesn't serve you a whole lot of good. Like, so why can't we pick up 2 different items in your hand and be able to run around with that? Like, I'd love to run around with 2 different gems. We're always relegated to just holding one item. And I'm always curious, like, why we can hold a chest with 2 hands. But that was something that I think would be a nice little fix in there. One of the things that came with Shrouded Spoils that was really interesting was the harder Kraken. And I say harder because to us then it was harder. It wasn't, exceptionally harder, but they played around with it a lot since then as far as the actual balance goes. But we didn't have a Kraken that could wrap your ship, and we didn't have a Kraken that could slap your hull and smack it. And having those enter into the mindscape of what a Kraken could do was not revolutionary, but it was a welcome change. And I think that was something that I was hoping for with the Kraken, or with the Megalodons. Like, now that we're getting into season 9, I kind of wish that we had an additional stage to the Kraken, something that was more than just what we currently have, but actually give us the head of a Kraken, something that can, do something that would be interesting enough into the fight that would cause us to have to adjust how we're playing, whether it be it's spitting a whole bunch of ink at us and causing us to all be blinded for a certain amount of time, anyone on top deck, or just screeching at us and causing us to kind of swagger back and forth, like as if we're dealing with piercing sounds and it's affecting our ability to aim or something like that. You know, you have to go below deck to be able to kind of deafen the sound of a Kraken screech, something like that. You know, something that would have really kind of made the Kraken more interesting as opposed to just more frequent. If I'm being honest. So additionally, with season 9, the fleet event, we're getting the ghost fleets back, which was a world event and then went away because of Flameheart, in the movement of the story there. That is kind of returning the same way that when Curse Sales came out, the fleet event was something that got introduced in Shrouded Spoils. It was something we could go and do. Now with the Ghost Fleet event, it's nice to see that back. But what I would have loved to have seen, in addition to this, is the skeleton brig. Because with Shrouded Spoils, we saw the skeleton sloops. And a lot of that was just due to the fact that at the time we had brigs, we had sloops, and we had galleons. And it was nice to be able to have the Kraken be able to attack all of them. And it was nice to have, the skeleton sloop added so that there was a little bit easier of a type of skeleton ship that you could go after, especially if you were just a solo sloop. But it's been too long since the skeletons have come up with a new type of ship. In fact, it's been since Shrouded Spoils. So I would have loved to have seen the skeleton brigs to add a 2-mast ship on the seas to be a skeleton ship that would add a little diversity to, like, okay, well, is that a skeleton sloop or is that as a player sloop? Is that a skeleton galleon or is that a player galleon? To add the skeleton brig to that question would have definitely made it a little more interesting, because if you see 2 masts on the horizon, there's no way that that's not a player ship. And I think it's time to see the skeleton brig. I want to see what that looks like. I want to go up against that and see, how is that in a sloop or how is that in a galleon? With Shrouded Spoils, we got the ship customizations for the wheel cannon and capstan, and they've done a good job of increasing the amount of loot available in the Emporium to be able to have the full set of cosmetics, and they're expanding it to the ship crests. Season 9, I think, really needed to push out more of those ship crests, really kind of give us all of the ones for the original sets that livery sets that we had when the game first launched. I want to be able to have custom ship crests for the different Bilge Rat Admiral sets, the Sea Dog sets, I'm thinking what the other ones, some of the different emissaries. Like, we haven't had, I imagine the emissary rewards are probably going to have the ship crests at some point, but now we're going into fishing poles and tankards. I think there's better stuff that we could have gotten out of the emissary stuff, but I'm sure it's probably in the loot table at some point. But I really would have liked to have seen Season 9 bring in additional type of ship customizations. Rowboats are one of the few things that everyone loves to use, and they've been a great addition, and they've evolved over the years to include cannons as well as harpoons. But we've never had the ability to change how they look or repair them. And I think a lot of us have always wanted to be able to repair them, because if you find a good one and it takes a couple hits from something, you want to be able to still use it. And if they start to get too damaged, then they start to get a little buggy and they don't really work well. Sometimes you just get a busted rowboat, and it's kind of a bummer. So I would have loved to have seen with Season 9 them add the ability to customize the rowboats, have that just automatically attuned to the color scheme of whatever your ship livery set is for your hull, and to be able to repair it, to be able to be able to use a couple pieces of wood to repair the body, so that if it does take damage, you can at least do something with it. So those are something that I was hoping to hear from with Season 9 when I started to realize what we were getting. We're getting Mermaid Gem rebalance. That was something that was brought in Shrouded Spoils. Those are being addressed in Season 9. And I think it's great to know that multiple gems could come from it. It doesn't make sense. I've resolved not to question how or why. Seems like just a thing they wanted to do. But it's interesting that with Shrouded Spoils, they introduced or reintroduced the Mermaid Gems, and now we're getting those back with Season 9 as a rebalance. Shrouded Spoils brought in the new fort loot, and I've kind of talked about that. But one thing I didn't mention was the chest of fortune, which gives you cosmetics for the fates of fortune. It's also a fairly good amount of gold as well, which is kind of nice. But this is going to reinvigorate the drive for players to go after Fort of Fortunes. I can't tell you how many times I've hopped onto a server and there's been a Fort of Fortune active. And this happens from time to time as content comes out. It becomes relevant, and then as the time goes by, it becomes less relevant and more people move on to different things. With season 8, it was all about the dives, and I imagine with season 9 it'll be all about the Fort of the Damned and the Fort of Fortune, because those are going to be the two ways to really address things that people don't engage with. I think the Fort of Fortune is a really interesting fort. It is obviously the hardest, which is very interesting that they are rebalancing it to accommodate solo play. I appreciate the fact that they're doing that as someone who plays a lot as a solo player. And as I think about, like, should this stay some of the hardest content when players who prefer to play solo want to be able to engage with all of the content? I'm of two minds, because I understand the drive to make content available to everyone, but at the same time, I also respect the desires of those who want to have engaging content that really forces them to pay attention. Because if they're either not paying attention to what's going on in front of them and they're paying attention to what's going on outside of the fort itself, and as far as like other ships coming in, you can very quickly die and then end up on the Ferry of the Damned. Whereas the opposite is true. If you're paying too much attention because the Fort of Fortune is so difficult, you may very well miss the rowboat of people who are coming over to sink your ship and then kill you and then steal your Fort of Fortune. So I understand the drive to want to have content that is challenging, because it keeps you on your toes, right? I'm very, very interested to see how hard a solo Fort of Fortune is, because currently it is pretty difficult. You typically have to get prepped for it if you want to do it solo, in the sense that you have to grab a bunch of Disney sticks and take them with you, so that way you can kind of deal with the Ashen Lord at the end in quick succession, as well as the Skeleton Lords, because they're cheap and do pocket blunders, which is something I think I would have liked to have seen addressed in season 9 as well too. I don't know, because we don't have the full notes yet, and I won't until Thursday. But hopefully they will have taken a look while they were rebalancing a lot of these events to kind of see and judge how the Skeleton Lords act, because it's something that I think is a little too annoying when the animation for a blunderbuss is not present or is delayed to a point where you die before you see the muzzle. I think that's something that I would hope is addressed in season 9, but I'm not going to hold out hope. I'm not going to get my hopes up that they addressed that when they were going through the rebalance. I think they probably just tweaked the numbers of the events themselves, as opposed to looking at how the content is engaged with. So it'll be interesting to find out when that actually goes live. The Fort of the Damned is another beast all in of itself. The Fort of the Damned, man, it's an interesting one, because I feel like anytime I engage in content that is activated on its own, in the middle of the Sea of Thieves, I'm putting myself out there that I'm willing to get attacked. And that's always stressful as someone that tends to play solo, as I want to get content done. But if I engage with a Fort of the Damned, I know that skull is going to draw more attention than if it were just a random skeleton fort that anyone could see and just assume like, oh, there's a good chance someone's not there or there. There's no way to really tell. And so the Fort of the Damned has always been one of those ones that I haven't engaged with, because I just don't want that kind of attention. And that's just how it, I'd rather have the loot, but I don't want the attention from the loot. And there's a lot of loot on there that will draw attention, but it makes sense why Rare has chosen the Fort of the Damned and the Fort of Fortune to introduce the stuff that they're doing, in the sense that they're bringing the Chest of Fortune to the Fort of Fortune because the Fort of Fortune is the hardest content. And the Chest of Fortune is the one item that is going to start to unlock the livery set for the Fates of Fortune. So it makes sense. The Fort of the Damned they're doing because they want players to engage with it, because you get the Reaper chests and the Reaper's bounties from that actual fort. So if you're going after the Fates of Fortune weapon set, and you have to go and get the actual Reaper's chests and Reaper's bounties, instead of sailing around the seas to go and grab those from shipwrecks, you can do a Fort of the Damned and acquire those bounties, those chests from that means, which is going to be a lot easier, I think, in my opinion, than having to sail around and waste time doing that. So it's very understandable. It will also contribute to those that need to turn in Athena loot to the Reapers. It will benefit those that want to work on those weapon sets. So I imagine Fort of the Fortune and Fort of the Damned are going to be two of the biggest different types of events that folks are going to focus on in Season 9. And they're going to be highly contested at the beginning. So if it's something that you know you want to do, be very cautious, because I think this is going to pull people away from dives and from the hourglass and bring back a lot of tucking. I think tuckers and people who are trying to snipe forts are going to be coming back to Season 9 because of the draw of having players who want to engage with the PvE content, not expecting the PvP aspect of it, but you really, really ought to. Ahoy there, pirates. This is the ad for this episode, and I did want to let you know, if you wanted to avoid these and just get a regular filler, you can head over to the Patreon. There's a special feed just for patrons that get the ad-free version. If you want to keep listening, though, I can't say I blame you, because this week I want to let you know about Loot Crate and getting 15% off of most crates and crate subscriptions when you use the link and code RobotsRadio in the show notes. Also, you can head over to audiobooks.com, get your first 3 audiobooks for free, and that can include any 2 VIP books, or use the affiliate link for Green Man Gaming. If you're a PC gamer or you'd like to save money on games, it's one of the benefits of being a PC gamer. Head over to Green Man Gaming. You can get codes for Steam, Epic, any of the different stores that they have deals going on. They have deals going on all the time, and if you plan on buying there, please consider using our affiliate link. All of that goes straight to me through the network. Thank you all so much for everything that you do to support this podcast. It means the world to me, and I continue to try and improve the quality and the content for you. With that, pirates, let's get back to the show. At the end of the day, when all is said and done, how do I think Season 9 will hold up to compared to Season 8 or Season 7? It always comes down to how engaging is this content going to be for players. And I'm very curious, because right now, Season 8 is some of the most compelling content for gamers, at least for those that are comfortable with PvP. Most of the PvE players probably aren't going to be interested in this. But I'm very curious to think about, what is this going to do for the Sea of Thieves? And I think this is going to be a return to form for those that enjoy the immersive nature of Sea of Thieves, those that are always kind of questioning, what is life going to be like on your voyage tonight? Like, what is your voyage going to have in store for you? Because right now, while Season 8 is going on, there's not a whole lot of PvP in adventure. There's a lot of people engaging in one-on-one battles. And with Season 9, I would not be surprised if we started to see more multi-ship battles at events. In fact, I'm hoping that that is kind of the case, because it'll be very interesting to see like what players decide to do. Will people go after this ship set? Is this ship set something that is worthwhile enough to them to be able to justify giving up on what they're working on to fight over a fort for 3 hours to see who wins just to get one chest? Or will players give up something like this? Will players give up, hop to another server, and go start a new Fort of the Damned? With the voyage costing doubloons and people having so many doubloons right now because there hasn't been a good dump for doubloons in the ecosystem, I would not be surprised if players start running into a situation where the game of attrition comes into play with their Fort of the Damned. And their Fort of the Damned does not warrant the amount of time and effort that is being put into when all they have to do is go to a new server, buy a new voyage, dig up the chest, and go start a new Fort of the Damned. At the end of the day, I think everyone is going to come to their own decision on how they address getting these cosmetics, if it's something they even want to get. What I would like to see from Rare is a continued effort to every year address how the balance of things are in the world. And that extends to loot as well. I think one of the big troubles that we have with loot right now is that there's a lot of different types of it, but the value is not always explicitly understood. The Chest of Fortune is an item that will be turned in for cosmetics specifically, not for the gold that you earn off of it. Yes, it will be a fair amount of gold, but it is not going to be the main driver for a lot of people. Cosmetics will, completionists will want those commendations done. And as such, when they get those done, I think people are going to disengage with the content. And I think once that happens, we'll see a return to normality where world events currently are ignored or not engaged with as much. So I'll be very curious to see how do people think season 9 will be when season 10 comes, and what would season 10 look like at this point. Season 10 is going to kick off in E3. Right now it is March. We've got March, April, May. And then 3 months would start off in June. There's probably going to be a rather big announcement in my mind. I don't have any confirmation on this or inside knowledge of this, but I have this thought in my mind where season 10 will probably be something large. Now, whether or not that's the Grand Maritime Union, Flameheart's return, maybe introduction of the captain, something big will happen. And I think that they're going to want to showcase that for E3, which is why I think season 9 is so light as far as big content drops. So I'll be very interested to see if this season is considered the Shrouded spoils before the anniversary update that brought us 9 Tall Tales in the original first year of the game. Because if that's the case, then I will probably still look back fondly on season 9 as one of the better seasons that really kind of helped bring life back to Sea of Thieves, allowed us to feel like this world was always changing and there was something unique to do or something to kind of change up the monotony of what you're used to. And season 10 will be the thing that shifts the gamer mental state as far as like, is Sea of Thieves worth jumping into now? Because I think season 10 will probably be one of the biggest seasons for Rare in the next year. And if I'm right about this, I'm excited at what the prospect is, because I've been seeing a lot of interesting things happening around the world. Obviously we've been seeing the weird rat kind of show up, which I think is actually going to be tied to a mystery. Not that I have any inside knowledge on this. That's where my mind goes when I see the little rat kind of in social media, because that's kind of what was going on with the first mystery. The mysteries were intended to be something that's part social media, part in game. And I think what we're going to start seeing with the kickoff of season 9 is that we're going to have that small little rat with the glowing eyes that we've seen in some of the social media content actually kind of show up in the world. And I would not be surprised if the rat can talk, as rats tend to do. Well, at least, depending on what kind of, TMNT, there's a rat that talks, Mickey Mouse, things like that. But much like Salty, I would not be surprised if we find out, like, if that rat talks, is it the trickster? That would be an interesting play, because it would be very, very funny to find out that the trickster was turned into a rat somehow. But there's a lot of interesting stuff that I think is going to happen that as we kind of play throughout the next set of adventures in season 9, what that leads into, because we know that the story of who am I thinking of? Riggsy. We know that the story of Briggsy is kind of on hiatus for right now, and that the next adventure is going to focus on the Pirate Lord and why that ties into that. But I wonder how much of this is all going to play into season 10 and how big season 10 is. Because if I have an inkling, I think season 10 is going to be the true return of Captain Flameheart. I think Flameheart will finally return, and we will see his body, and we will be able to like interact and talk with him. He'll be down in the Reaper's lair, all that jazz. I think Flameheart's coming back in season 10. I think we're going to see a really big to-do about it during E3, and I'm very excited to see, because we know E3, there are things probably going to happen around the 11th of June, which would probably be right about the same time that season 9 is wrapping up, given that season 9 is kicking off on the 16th of March, 3 months later, right around that same time. Would not surprise me if they decided to do, let's take a look at June and see what the Thursday would be after that. So it would probably be the 15th if it's after that. I would not be surprised if season 9 goes until the 15th of June, and then there's a week space maybe, or they just push it to the 22nd of June, and it's right around the same time that I think Pirate's Life came out. So very interesting thoughts from myself. What do you all think? Do you think that this falls in line with a good track record on what they've done in the past? Do you think that Rare has something big like that on the horizon? I know a lot of folks want it to be a Pirate's Life 2. I don't think that's the case, guys. I really don't. I would be very happy if it was, but I don't think it will be. I think it'll be the return of Captain Flameheart, because that story has not picked up since the last community decision, which was New Golden Sands. And I think with season 9, we'll finally get a lot more of Golden Sands done. I'll be very interested to see how much is done, because I want to see what happens to the shipwrights and the Merchant Alliance. I think those are the two right now that are out on that dock, that I want to see like how built up that is in season 9. So very interested to see, but I'm very curious what you all think, if season 10 is going to be as big as I think it's going to be, but something connected to Sea of Thieves' story, not necessarily a Pirate's Life. All right, with a little bit of time left in the episode and having a chance to kind of sit down and stew on what season 9 is going to end up being before I get a chance to actually jump in, I wanted to go back to a couple of the comments that I've gotten that I said I wanted to actually get there. So this one comes from Banana Mutt Nuffin over on YouTube, who wrote in and put a really nice comment in for the episode with the Gold Hoarders back at the end of February. He says, "Awesome podcast. Few things I wanted to point out from personal experience," which I always love. I love when y'all tell me what your personal experience is on things, because everyone does things a little bit differently, and it's fun to kind of hear how people go about playing Sea of Thieves. So they go on to say, "Honestly, I feel like people would still be surprised of the amount of people who are still playing on last gen consoles or older graphics cards. I literally just upgraded my PC GPU to a 3060, it's NVIDIA 3060. But before that, I had a 1060 with 3 gigabytes for the longest time." Which, if you guys don't know, is actually weaker than the graphics cards that I'm currently working off of, which is I think like an 8 gigabyte 1080 from 2017. So quite an old card to still be playing Sea of Thieves on. Almost worse than the Xbox One base console itself, which is not wrong. And believe it or not, if you put everything on the worst settings at the lowest resolution, you can still play Sea of Thieves on quite a lot of old hardware out there. It's really amazing just how bad the game can look if you really want to turn stuff down. And a lot of it's tied to resolution as well too. But they go on to say, "Now that I upgraded, my friends and I hopped on, but every single one of my friends I'm playing with currently are on the Xbox One S last gen. I wish they would give out the number of how many people are still last gen, but I'm sure it's not a small number. I believe if they did do a Sea of Thieves 2, and this is in response to them getting rid of the last gen support and moving just strictly to newer gen consoles. I believe if they do a Sea of Thieves 2 only for the new console generation, A lot of those people would be forced to buy one as other games are starting to take that route. Also, Sea of Thieves 2 would be so cool. Take Call of Duty for an example. Every year they were coming out with a new game with new cosmetics, regardless of rather people bought them on the previous regardless of whether or not people bought them on the previous title. Not everything always needs to be carried over. We had our fun with this one. It would be nice to move on. Destiny is a great example of people grinding for years just so that they could come out with Destiny 2 and start all over again. And that was fine. There was a carryover aspect of it. Maybe they can do the same. So Banana, thank you for writing in. Thank you for sharing your feelings on that. I was very surprised to see you write in and talk about how so many of your friends are playing on the last gen consoles. I think as the price of the Series S goes down, if it does go down, it's hard to know. We saw on Black Friday last year that it was down to $200, which is cheaper than getting into a Switch for next gen hardware. Granted, it does have trade-offs as far as like the actual hard drive space and stuff. I think as we get to those types of norms for sales, like $250, $225, $200, it'll definitely be a lot easier for folks to get into the next generation without having to spend upwards of $400 the way Sony does with their PlayStation 5. Granted, their PlayStation 5 without the disc is on technical parity with their PlayStation 5 with a disc. It's just that extra $100 that they charge for that disc drive, which does cut out a lot of folks as far as like what they can do. But the Xbox One S, if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think that was the SAD edition. I think they had the SAD edition, and then they had the One S as well, and then they had the One X, which were the newer gens or the newer revisions of the One. So I'll be very curious to hear if any of your friends decide to pick up or are looking forward to picking up an Xbox One or an Xbox Series S, or if they're going to go out for a Series X as well and just get the bigger system for that. Additionally, Mr. Andrew over on YouTube also wrote in, and I wanted to make sure that I bring this up as well too. I can't remember if I did or not. I feel like I did, but I can't remember. But oh no, I remember, because I remember getting comments about how people would like the idea of swapping chickens to penguins and stuff. But he did want to talk about as far as like the ice zone region getting abandoned too quickly. I do remember I actually picked that up and we talked about it as well. But I really love kind of getting through the comments and seeing what people say. Thank you so much for those that have reached out just to say that you appreciate the work that I do, that you like the mic quality. I'm glad you enjoy it. The patrons are the ones that got me the microphone. The patrons are the ones that are helping make it sound so good. So as much as I appreciate you telling me that the mic quality is good, if it wasn't for the patrons, I would not have such a nice microphone to be able to record on. So it's all thanks to them. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Let me take a break. I want to scrub through Discord to see if there was something that I might have missed. Boy, am I glad that I checked the Discord, because I almost forgot to include the announcement of a Sea of Thieves board game coming to you via Steam Forged Games. This is going to be called The Voyage of Legends. Now, we don't know a whole lot about it. We don't know if there's going to be any little miniatures. We know that there's going to be little cardboard cutouts that are going to have different types of ships, as well as enemies that you have to deal with. It's going to be a typical board game that you would probably see. There's going to be tokens. There's going to be cards that have different stats on them. And you're going to have different episodes that you have to work through and achieve different goals and deal with, enemy types as you kind of work through different voyages and stuff like that. From what I can tell, it's hard to know for sure. They don't have any information about this on their website right now. Right now, they just have a couple tweets about it and a newsletter that you can sign up for. The one tweet says, "As a little Friday treat for you, a first look at some of the components of our upcoming pirate adventure, which had to have a Kraken boss that has the Kraken head as part of the actual encounter. Curse you, Rare. How dare you put the Kraken head into a board game before you put it into Sea of Thieves. I can't believe it. But it's interesting that they're coming out with a board game. Now, if you're interested in kind of finding out a little bit more about this, I'll put a link to this in the show notes if you want. And to kind of give you an idea of what this is going to cost, most of the games that are over on Steam Forged Game are roughly somewhere between $70 to $100. The main board game, I think for, let's see, what do they have? The actual board game for Horizon Zero Dawn is like $110. Resident Evil 2 somewhere between the 50 to 100, depending on if you get the expansions. I'll be very curious to see how this all kind of plays out. Like if it's going to be $100 to get go. If it does, I'm going to expect miniatures. If it doesn't, then I would imagine it would probably be a little bit less, because right now, as I'm kind of looking through their website, they've got Elden Ring, they've got Dark Souls, they've got Resident Evil, they've got Gears of War, some of this stuff like Devil May Cry. They definitely do a lot of games as board games. But I think that a lot of these are mostly in the range of, yeah, I'd say like $70 to $100 roughly. So go into it knowing that. It's great to see that Sea of Thieves is expanding to this. It's more than just a Monopoly game. It's more than just a tabletop adventure or tabletop RPG. This is going to be a straight up board game with actual, like, I've got a Gargoyles one that I've played a couple times in the past. I don't really go in for board games, so I'm still kind of hesitant to actually pick this one up because I don't see myself really doing this too often. I'd much rather be jumping on the actual game where I've got stuff to do, as opposed to this where it's going to be sitting down and playing it with a bunch of people that aren't nearly into as Sea of Thieves as I probably am. So they'd probably be humoring me in this case. But it is cool to see for a lot of folks that really, really love board games, and I think it's great that Sea of Thieves is expanding out and getting their IP out there. It's really great. So I'm still working with the studio right now to try and get an interview with Adam and Pete, who are in charge of all of that. They're very busy, as you can tell, trying to work out these deals and get these things made. But I'm still working to try and get them on the show so I can talk to them about different things, as including figures. I want to know, where are the Sea of Thieves figures? But one of the questions that came in actually came in from Super Pack over on the Discord, and he says, so now that there's a Sea of Thieves tabletop game on the horizon, when do you think we'll see a spin-off video game? A lot of big Microsoft franchises have had those. Gears, Halo, Fable, Forza with Horizon, which was a spin-off of the regular Forza Motorsport. What is your ideal Sea of Thieves spin-off game? And I had to sit here and think about this, because I genuinely am not sure what would I want, because Sea of Thieves, it takes care of the first person aspect of it. It takes care of the simulation aspect of it. I get a lot of satisfaction out of killing skeletons and digging up stuff. I would really have a hard time thinking of what I love to do, because for me, when I think of my go-to games, as far as like what is outside of Sea of Thieves that I play, that are the type of games that I just absolutely love digging into. Heroes of the Storm, World of Warcraft, Destiny 2, all of those have grind hooks built into them. And what I mean by grind hooks are just things that get you in and out of the game, but give you a small bit of satisfaction, of reward. You get that dopamine hit when you win a match. You get that dungeon that you run and you get some loot out of it. You get into a strike or a raid that you get some loot, and you get to work on bringing up your power score. So all of those things are things that I really, really love with Sea of Thieves. I don't know how Sea of Thieves would ever be able to move into one of those types of games. So I have such a hard time thinking of what would I want out of a Sea of Thieves game. And I think it would probably have to be a first person, or no, excuse me, not a first person, a single player, third person action adventure game. Let's go Legend of Zelda. I would love to have something akin to Breath of the Wild, where not even Breath of the Wild. I'll take it even one step further. I'll go all the way back to Wind Waker, because I think that's where a lot of my love for sailing comes from, is probably Wind Waker. Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, if you've never played it, and I wouldn't blame those that maybe haven't, because it is not very accessible, for one, and for two, it's an older game, and there's been 22 years since that was released. So I wouldn't blame anyone for not having an opportunity to sit down and play it. But Zelda Wind Waker is probably one of the highlights from the GameCube era that I always think about when it comes to piracy, and there are pirates in it. But if I had my decision, I would love to take Mike Chapman, sit him down, him and Chris Alcock, knock out a story, a full story narrative, and have the team that is working on Everwild put Everwild on hold, because who knows what that is at this point? No one knows. They haven't addressed it since 2019 when they announced it at the Xbox event that they did in, what was that, November, December? I can't remember. And they haven't talked about it since. It's been very hush. But I would love to have a Legend of Zelda Wind Waker game that is single player. It's got a boss. It's got a story. It's got your main character. You can make your pirate, take the infinite pirate generator, apply it to this game. Let me make my pirate. Let me copy my pirate over from Sea of Thieves into this game. That would be even better. I would love to be able to take my pirate with all of the cosmetics that I have and just have them represented, pulled over into a third-person action-adventure game that allows me to play as my pirate. I've still got my sword. I've still got my, my flintlock pistol. I've still got my Eye of Reach and my blunderbuss, and those are the tools at my disposal. But I have to play through a story that is on par with the books, that is on par with the Tall Tales, and let me have that single player experience in Sea of Thieves, have the same aesthetic, or even, go a little less realistic or a little more realistic, dabble around. It could be completely different, but I would love to have one of those games, because I genuinely do feel like those games are the games that I enjoy when I can't play with my friends and I don't feel like fighting online for something or doing, something that's grinding for no reason. Destiny is a game that I grind for no reason. Nothing about the game do I think ever really impacts the state of my character, the state of my being and what I do in life, but it's just a thing that hits that dopamine button every day. But I would love to have a story from Mike Chapman and Chris Alcock, because I think that their narrative is some of the best I've seen in games. When it comes to Tall Tales and Adventures, I think they do a fantastic job telling a story, and their imagination is on par with some of the best Imagineers from Disney, in my opinion. And I would love to have that Legend of Zelda epic adventure like Wind Waker with my pirate in a story curated, like purposefully curated to take me on an adventure. Have it be Pirates of the Caribbean, but as Sea of Thieves, told as a Legend of Zelda Wind Waker game. If I could have that, man, that would satisfy a lot of the checkboxes on, I think, what a good spin-off game would be for Rare. And I think Rare has the talent to do it. And it would be interesting to see, with them going with all of the knowledge, all of the stuff that they've learned over the last 5 years with Sea of Thieves, what would a third-person action-adventure game with your pirate as the main protagonist be like in a Sea of Thieves story that is just a single-player story put into a video game? Like, what would that be like? And if that was something that Rare could do, and I think a lot of studios could do it, I would love to see, like something on level with Santa Monica Studios or Naughty Dog, or I'm blanking out on other studio, like Outer Worlds, or not Outer Worlds. Oh gosh, not Coalition would be good too. But what is the Obsidian? What Obsidian could do if they were given the opportunity to do that. I would love to see. I can't think of the studio that does Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I can't think of who that studio is off the top of my head, but they're exceptional storytellers. I would love to see what they could do if they were given the keys to Sea of Thieves to build a single player game that was like Legend of Zelda. Like, what would that be like? What do you all think? What would yours be? I know People's Republic in the Discord actually responded to Super PAC's or CJ's question and actually said that they'd like to have a TV series first, which I would love to see as well too. Given that I just finished up The Last of Us, I would love to see a Sea of Thieves story told as gritty, maybe not as graphic, but as gritty as Black Sails. But they answered the question and says maybe a Sea of Thieves tactics game a la Koei's Uncharted Waters, New Horizons on the SNES, which I've never heard about it. Super PAC says a swashbuckling roguelike would be interesting, and then follows up with a deck builder. I would love to see something that is like, what are your ideas for this? Because I'm leaning into what I love, which is Legend of Zelda, if I can't have the dopamine hits that I usually get from other games, because I love sitting down and experiencing a world. Call of the Sea is a fantastic story-driven game with puzzles that is so aligned with what I love out of Sea of Thieves that I recommend anyone that hasn't played Call of the Sea, please go invest the few dollars that it is on whatever system you're playing on right now and experience Call of the Sea, because I think it's one of the best stories as far as like, this is an indie game that is telling a story and there's going to be some interesting puzzles, kind of like an escape room that you can experience right now. But I would love to see what that second team is doing, or not the second team, but what that other project team is working on Everwild for. Drop Everwild and make a single player Sea of Thieves game that you can import your pirate from Sea of Thieves from. That would be cool. I would love to see that, especially given the nature of how they wanted to originally have you be able to use I can't remember if it was the Game Boy camera, but at one point Rare wanted to give the ability to import your face onto a character in GoldenEye. I think this is true. If it's not true, then feel free to call me out. I know you guys were really good at helping kind of research some of this stuff. Thank you all, by the way, for the responses for I forgot his name. What is the guy's name? I hate that I forgot this. Son of a gun. The Rudolph the Red-Nosed Ranger guy. It was like, nope, it's gone. It's 100% gone. This is what a week does to me. It wasn't even a week ago. God, that's even worse. My memory sucks. But yeah, I remember at a point Rare wanted to be able to have it so that your face could be on a character in GoldenEye. And I remember them doing stuff with, was it Donkey Kong 64? I think it was Donkey Kong 64. Or it was Banjo-Kazooie. No, I think it was Banjo-Kazooie, where you could hop swap the cartridges or something like that and be able to get access to other games by force loading content from another cartridge. And it was they have these amazing ideas and they don't always get to execute on them. But if Everwild was a different game and I could choose what that game would be, I would love to be able to import my pirate from Sea of Thieves into a first person game that had a story by the narrative team over at Rare, allowing me to play through a Legend of Zelda Wind Waker-esque Sea of Thieves game. That would be the spin-off that I would want. What do you guys think? Let me know. All right, pirates, that's going to do it for this episode of the Keelhauled podcast. Just a reminder, Season 9 is kicking off on the 16th. The documentary, which I would ask all of you to please go watch to let Rare know how much you appreciate them putting all the effort into making that, that comes out on the 20th. You've got Twitch drops starting on the 16th through the 20th, all the way up until the anniversary. And you still have time to go and actually work on the different things that are going to be coming out that during that time, as far as like login bonuses, the community day, the community weekend, I guess is going to be for all the ancient skellies. So make sure you book that time, take off time if you need to, get your doctor's notes ready, because there's going to be a lot of money to be earned through ancient skellies. There's going to be a lot of fun to have in Sea of Thieves with the new update. There's going to be a lot of people out there fighting ancient skellies in the middle of a fort of fortune as the fog is rolling in and players are sneaking on to sink their ship. It's going to be amazing. Look forward to the stories and all the fun. With pirates, if you Want to get a hold of me? There's plenty of ways to do that. Head over to Twitter at CAPT_LOGUN. You can send an email to CAPTLOGUN@gmail.com. You can write in the comments on the YouTube version of this, or you can write your messages to me on the Twitter, or not Twitter, on the Discord as well. So feel free to head over to the Discord server. There's a questions and feedback channel just for the show. So if you want to write to me about that, if you have enough time and you want to hear my thoughts about other stuff going on in Xbox's industry, I am now a co-host and have been a co-host for a couple months now over on the Xbox Expansion Pass. Luke Lore and I have had a fantastic time chatting every Saturday. The show comes out on Sundays, and we just really love talking about stuff that's going on in the industry. And I think this one, I finally kind of went a little hard in on Suicide Squad, because I was really disappointed with the marketing. So there's some good listens out there. If you're interested in keeping up on the news with that, I would encourage you to go check that out. Let me know what you think. Give Lore or Luke some love over there as well, because he's working hard. He is working so hard to try and put out good content for everyone, just like I try to do every week for you. And I would appreciate the love and support if you can. Pirates, that's going to do it. So thank you. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you on the Sea of Thieves.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.
Hey there, my name's Jameson, or Big Cat.
And I am Brenna, or Mother Goose.
And together, we are the hosts of the DL Weekly Gaming News.
Each week, we bring you the top stories from last week, as well as something you might have missed.
Our goal is to start a conversation about what's going on in the world of gaming.
And every week, we have a special guest join us in the chat room, where we discuss a different gamer-related topic and learn more about our guests in the 60-second download.
And if that isn't enough, we also have Slim Jims.
So come and hang out with us every week and join in on the conversation.
Good luck and have fun, everybody.
And remember, keep your goose loose.
Do you love the Mass Effect series, and are you looking to learn even more about Mass Effect? The things that you didn't even know that you didn't know? Well, this is your host, Tom, or Robots, and me and my co-host N7 Legend do a show called the Mass Effect Lorecast. It is available on whatever podcatcher you're listening to this right now. We also do it live on twitch.tv/robotsradio, 10:30 Eastern, 7:30 Pacific on Sunday nights. So go look it up right now, the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to have you join us.